Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or your digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organization. Each and every episode, we sit down with leaders from various fields, just like you're grabbing a cup of coffee with them. We dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Are actually the biggest obstacles to your growth? Well, welcome to the Speak with People podcast, the show dedicated to helping leaders improve their communication so they can deepen connections, expand their influence, and build trust. My name is Jason Raitz. I'm excited that you're with us today. Today, we're unpacking a powerful truth about fear that actually, when it's embraced, can lead to some very powerful change and transformation. So if you ever found yourself avoiding difficult conversations, shying away from new opportunities, or letting doubt keep you from stepping into your full potential, you're not alone. And I know this episode is going to be great for you today. I am so incredibly excited. I've been looking forward to this episode for some time. I absolutely love the guest that we have and the leadership that he's actually taught from afar. I've loved looking over his company and the things that I've learned. He's a transformational coach, decades of experience helping leaders. And I just want to get right to the interview. Dan Tocchini, thank you so much for being on the Speak with People podcast.
Well, Jason, thanks for having me. It's a real honor. I've been looking forward to it myself. Trying to get this together has been a little crazy, and I'm so glad we landed it. So
I love
great
it.
to be here, man.
Well, hey, before we hop into this conversation, because I know probably already many of our listeners are on the edge of their seats like I am, give us a little bit of your story, who you are, what got you to this place, and we'd love to know a little bit more about you.
I grew up in my grandparents came over here from the old country, both my dad's side from Italy and my mother's side from the Basque region of France, and they're Irish too. Where my grandmother was Irish, so I'm the second generation here, but grew up in a very ethnic home. My parents got divorced. My mother after she had my youngest brother, had basically a schizophrenic, manic depressive break,
Oh, wow.
Psychotic. And I was about 12 or 11, and I ended up between. I'm the oldest. Between her and the psychiatrists, I was able to connect with her at a very young age. Didn't want to give up. At one point they wanted to give her a lobotomy back in the 60s.
Oof.
That's what they did. And I was able to convince my dad not to do it and give me a shot, and was able to connect with her. And so at a young age, I started going back and forth, and then I would debrief with the psychiatrists, and they would send me. I had the privilege of meeting a guy named Fritz Perls, who basically started Gestalt therapy and was part of the Esalen Institute in Big Sur. And I would debrief with these guys periodically. Got very interested in understanding how to communicate, because my mother was hard to communicate with. Highly intelligent, extremely symbolic when she was off in it. And so it started there, really. The first book I ever read was Gestalt Therapy verbatim. I read it at 12. And then I got into neuro-linguistic programming at a young age, and just searched everything I could, mainly so that I could communicate. And coming out of high school, I was pretty, I think, wounded and angry, and had a chip on my shoulder. Had a full ride to play baseball or football, whatever school. I had 36 different schools. And I broke my foot, got very depressed, got into drugs, and for a few years, and then came out of that addiction, realizing through the work that I had done over the period of time, the whole time reading. I've always been a reader, but I really got deep into the human potential movement, and then I had a faith experience, and I found some similarities, and I did a lot of personal work at a very young age. I've been clean now 40 years. So, but
Wow.
I did all the 12-step work, and then I did some other work. I've done a lot of different types of work to kind of work through my own, if you will, demons.
Mhm.
And that's really where leadership, I found leadership starts. It starts in mastering yourself, really getting in touch with what goes on for you. Like if you're leading people, they're going to touch your buttons. And if they don't, you're really not connected,
Right.
right? So you got a team of people, you've got a diverse group of people who are different backgrounds, different skills, different agendas and interests. How do you bring those together? And that process is probably most likely going to bring up some of your demons, whatever they may be. And if you're not aware of them, then your demons will have you, you won't have them.
Mm.
And that's a real problem. That's when you find patterns that you get into a pattern, and then you get into a new relationship and you wonder when's the other foot going to drop, because you're out of touch with how you're actually seeding the breakdown
Wow.
that's going to separate the relationship, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And so my work has been around kind of getting to the truth about lies,
Wow.
if you would, right? And I've done a lot of work around that. One of the things I work with leaders on is, look, if you want to understand, if you're not in touch with your lies, and look, we really are kind of out of touch with the fact that the roots of deception are biological, right? I mean, lying is a survival mechanism. Uh, it's a response to fear. Deception often arises from the desire to avoid danger, or to presence, or to preserve a social status, or to manipulate outcomes in one's favor. And usually those strategies are around looking good, feeling good, being right, and being controlled.
Mm.
That in control. If you would, that would constitute survival. So if it looks like I'm going to look bad, if I'm not aware of how my internal reactions to that, then I'll be swept up by my fear of looking bad, and I'll start to lie to myself and others about who I am. And of course, the age-old problem with that is if you start liking the lie, then I'm in a dilemma because it's not really where I'm at. And now I'm going to try to perpetrate that lie in order to keep our relationship going for whatever I'm getting from it or whatever protection I might think it gives me. And now I've begun the long and arduous kind of trek into the abyss of inauthenticity.
Mm.
And and I've got to get in touch with and constantly keep an eye on just the lies I tell myself, how they work out in my relationships, the implications and impact they have on the people I love and work with. Both. It's not like it just goes on at work. It's not like we have these little silos. We bring our way of being, our way of seeing the world everywhere we go. And I always tell my leaders who say, well, it's not like this at home. Well, when the people at work get to know you like the woman at home or your family at home, it's going to show up. You're going to see the same. If you get to the same level of at stakeness or investment,
Mm.
the more invested you are, the more the lies start to, they'll start to, if you're living in them, they'll start to presence themselves in the relationships,
Wow. Wow.
if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Wow. You've kind of kicked us off with a bang with a master class on some uh, self awareness and diving deep into ourselves as leaders. That's incredible. My goodness.
But if you can't lead yourself, if you can't lead yourself, you're going to lead people into the same dungeon you're living in.
Absolutely.
If you're not aware of how you lock yourself up, and if you want to produce breakthrough results, it really starts with self-management, leading yourself.
Wow. So did some of the realization of this is this what led you to start your organization where you work with companies and leaders? What kind of helped launch that?
Yeah, I've had, this is my second consulting
Okay.
firm. I did a lot of work. I worked in the church for a while as an itinerant minister and did transformational work there, renewal, discipleship kind of work. Usually with missionaries, did a lot of work kind of helping regenerate missionaries after they come off the field and
Mm.
clearing them and getting them reset to go back out. Did that with all kinds of different organizations, YWAM, bunch of organizations as a young man. I came out of there and I did some work with kids coming out of gangs.
Oh,
I
wow.
wrote a curriculum. It's the most studied curriculum in the U.S., being used on the East and now the West Coast. Did it in the early 2000s in the East Coast. And at the same time, I was running a consulting firm. I
Mm.
sold that firm in 2009, and the non competes were up in 2012. And I launched, basically went into working with a guy, hired me to come into a nonprofit to work with lifers coming out of prison because he saw the work I did with kids coming out of gangs 4 or 5 generations
Wow.
and wanted to implement that into lifers as they came out, they get out on parole. How can you help them re-enter? So we developed a program that was very successful. In fact, there's a number of organizations. One of them is called CROP, CROP. It's a acronym, and they have the lowest recidivism rate in the country, zero.
Wow.
Nobody's ever gone back in like 7 years, and they use it's my curriculum that they use. Then they add professional components to it. But I worked with them in prison for many years, and then they got out and formed this organization. And now the state of California gives them 35 million a year. They're written into the state budget. They're so effective. So I'm really proud of just being part of
Wow.
that organization.
Wow.
So, but while I was doing that, I had a consulting firm, sold that, started this one, and then did that with the guys coming out of prison. And then the guy I did that work with, we started this company, Take New Ground, about 8 years ago. And I've done a lot of work. The previous consulting firm, I did a lot of work with Disney and ESPN. I was involved in that merger. I restructured ESPN's finance department. I did a bunch of work with Disney and negotiating, developed curriculum for the Disney University. So I've got a background in training and development, and I did a lot of work with sales. ESPN, I worked with their sales team, their international sales team, and their national sales team. I've done a lot of work with Interstate Batteries with their executive team. We helped restructure some of the stuff there. So I've been around. I'm 69, about a week ago. So
Wow.
the sexy age of 60.
I
So
love it. I love it. I wish I would have known you this time last year. I was negotiating with a company who was buying a piece of our content that we developed, and we ended up co-branding it so I can still use it and they use it. And then they've kind of tweaked it and kind of made it their own. But it was the first, I was first time I was ever trying to negotiate. What is my content worth? It was fascinating to get
what was
through.
the content? What was the content?
It ended up, we renamed it, and now it's a presentation that they use called the Client Communication Edge. So they're an annuity company, and they sponsor events all the time for Fifth Third Bank and Truist Wealth, and
Oh,
so
yeah, yeah,
yeah, and so the I've learned now that I do lots of work with banks and financial investment firms. They don't pay for any of their own training development. They have all these other, sponsors that will pay for stuff. So they'll
right.
sponsor me to come in and speak. So that was the content. So we developed this presentation, and so yeah, it was a really
I
interesting.
love it. I
It was a
love it. I love when you're just, it's like you're good at what you do. You impact them. Now they want to buy it. That's beautiful, man.
Ah, it was wonderful.
Good for
So
you.
now I'm hoping, okay, this next year I'll learn the lessons that I learned. I don't want to go into this too much, but I've spent a good amount of time the last couple of years kind of coming out of a poverty mindset. And I think all of my years, like you, working in the church, I didn't quite know my value, especially as I started working
Yeah.
in the corporate world. So I've had to do some of that. And really, the fear I've kind of had to reinvent myself as I went from 26 years of pastoring, planting a church, church world speaking to now corporate speaker, trainer,
Yeah, right.
running. And so, how can leaders kind of shift that mindset when fear is just, it just can destroy us. I, yeah, I think it's embarrassing if I actually started to write out, if you saw the list of all the things that I've held back on because of fear.
Yeah. Well, it's if you don't have fear, you're dead.
Mm,
Like, and
yes.
fear is the beginning of wisdom. Let's get real. Fear is the beginning of wisdom.
Mm,
You fear something because you have something you value. So, a lot of people think, well, I got to get rid of this fear. No, actually, you've got to, let's say fear is an ally, not an enemy.
mm.
So if you think about it, have you ever read Fyodor Dostoevsky?
No, I have not.
Okay, so he's a phenomenal writer, and his point was his he writes a lot around fear. He wrote a book called Crime and Punishment, and he actually jumps on this idea. The character's name is Raskolnikov, and he commits a crime. He commits a murder, and Dostoevsky goes into how Raskolnikov uses his lies, his fear. He lies to avoid the fear, to give himself a false sense of confidence. And we do
Mm,
that. We lie to ourselves automatically because we're afraid to face what's there. Now, where this shows up like, let's say in a business, something comes up, let's say with one of your best sales guys or gals, right? And their attitude, their way of being with the team is impacting the rest of the team. And you need to talk to them because you got to get them aligned. And you know that, and you're nervous because if you piss them off, they may not produce.
right.
Right? So scarcity is I'm letting the fear run me. I'm not using the fear to understand what it is I need to face into. Now, I have a saying, and it goes like this: what you don't face now will eventually defeat you.
Whew.
Now, one way to overcome fear is to rigorously investigate the short term gain that you're going to get by acquiescing to the fear, the short term relief. Like, I don't talk to this person because I want them to continue to produce. So the short term relief is they continue to produce well, but the long term grief is the problems that are happening on the team, and that the team eventually starts to break down, people start to leave. Like, the more I understand the long term pain, the more courageous I'll be in the short term to have the conversations that I'm afraid to. I'll start to think about them and how to have them rather than how to get around them, right? And
Wow.
it's probably one of the biggest areas that we focus on, because look, if Joe there is going along, or Tom or Jane, and they're producing well, and they've been there for years, you're afraid to talk to them because they know all the secrets. They
Mm,
understand what's going on, and you're afraid that they're going to bring stuff up that's going to stop the team, or they're going to stop producing, or they're going to use it against you. And so you knuckle under. But the problem is, it's only going to get worse if you really stop and think about it. And so the idea is, how do you sit down? What are some ways to have conversations where you can turn, let's say, a shitty situation into fertilizer for the future? Let's
yep.
just say that. And there are I use a framework I've used since I was a kid with my mother, and it works everywhere. And the key is being able to name the upset. You can start there. Can you name what you're really upset about?
Mm,
What is the like? Can you name it in one sentence? And a lot of times, most people, look, if you and I have an upset, and I've done this with my daughter. I just went through a really intense period with my daughter. She's got two kids where we get along really well, and it broke down because we were looking at making a decision. She didn't like it. She was upset, and I just did exactly what I normally do. and I sat down and I said, okay, what's my upset? What is the breakdown for me here? Boom. Can I name it? Now, when I can name it and I can put it in very clear terms in a sentence, then the next thing I want to do is give her an example of what I'm seeing. Now, I'm not going in to prove her wrong. I'm going in to offer her what I'm seeing so she can see what I see and see if that opens up another possibility. And I want to see what she sees. But I
Wow.
need to tell her first, here's what the breakdown is for me. And here's an example. You did this, I did this, you did this, you said this, I said that. There's an example. And this went on. There's an example of what I'm upset about, and this is what I made up about it, right? And when that happens, because she now can see an example of what I was talking about, here's what I experience. Not here's what you make me feel. Here's what I actually experience. It may not be true, but it's what I feel. I feel, I might feel left out. I might feel sad. I might be afraid that you're going to hurt yourself or you're going to leave me or whatever. There's a number of different things I can list, but this is what I feel. I feel angry. I get resentful. I shut down and like that. And then the next thing I do, and I write all this down before I have the conversation,
Sure.
so I'm grounded, right? And the next thing I talk about is how I contributed to this.
Oh, wow.
You know, maybe it was like this has gone on for me now for a couple of weeks or months, and I haven't said anything about it. I've been trying to let it go. So my lack of addressing it has been a real problem because in a way, it's a lie of omission. And it's gotten between me and you, not like it's gotten between you with me, but it's gotten between me with you. Like I can own, there's a number of things I can look into and say, okay, here's how I've contributed, whether it's this much or this much, right? Like that. So I tell her, I want her to know that I see how I've contributed. And then I want to let her, I'm going to ask her, say, no, look, here's what I've been thinking about. If this continues, here's what my concern is. Here's what I think's at stake in the future that's coming if we continue in this breakdown. And I
Wow.
illuminate what I'm concerned about, right? Because she gets a sense now of what I'm seeing and why I might be upset or, like that. And all the while, she can interrupt and clarify. I've got this written down so I can be grounded. So if she takes it off in any direction, I can hear her, connect with her, and then that I can add that information to what I've already prepared, which makes it
Wow.
even more easy for her to consider what I'm saying, and for me to consider where she's at.
Wow.
Right. So if that makes sense, and then I could say, look, and that's what I'm concerned is going to occur. So here's my proposal. Here's what I'd like to do this. What do you think? And I give her a little proposal. And I tell her, no matter what, if you accept the proposal or not, here's how I'm committed to you, whether you accept the proposal or not. And then she can counter, she can edit. But I mean, the conversation can go anywhere because I've got my track I'm coming back to.
Right.
And then I have a whole series of uh, conversations with myself before I even, like when I'm doing that little framework I just talked about, I actually apply, like when I get to the place about how I've contributed, for instance, and I'm writing it down and I'm seeing how I'm contributing, I ask myself, well, given what is the judgment that I've used to make myself right about not talking about this or about doing whatever I did? And what's the payoff I've been getting for this thing being broken down? Like I'm getting something from it or it wouldn't be there. Right. So I
Wow.
wonder what that is. If I take the time to look at all that, I'm going to be less charged up, less. What I want to do is the log is right here. So if I
Mhm.
get a hold of the log here, she'll see better how to remove whatever log's there for her.
Wow.
If there's an authentic relationship in play. If it doesn't, if there's no authentic relationship, I'm going to find out. And then I'll be able to look at whatever lie I've been telling myself about this relationship as well.
Wow. Wow.
I, does that make sense?
Yes, and all I keep thinking about is the teams that I've been on in the past, or some of the relationship moments I've had with either family that could have could have been dealt with And then I just let all of this time in, and it
Oh,
just made
brother.
the problem worse. And I mean, it's just incredible.
People make
We all
stuff
do
up.
that.
Everybody makes stuff up, or it's not going away. Then just like you're actually talking to each other, but you're not. You can never get close together.
Right.
It's like two magnets. You don't go. They're opposites. They don't go together until you have that conversation. And usually, in my experience, and like I said, I had this upset with my daughter. We were only upset for a day, and I sat down and did that work on myself. And ironically, or paradoxically, I don't know how you say it, or fortuitously, I guess the word would be. My daughter did the same thing because I've trained her in this. So when we got together, we had a great coffee. We had a great time. It was, a little hurtful. We both wept a little bit, and I listened to her, and she listened to me, and we got edged up a little bit, but it was really good. And then we came together and worked out well, you know, and no big deal, no big drama. We had coffee now, and we went and worked out the next day together, and things are great. We were able to get through it. And her husband said, "Man, it's amazing, you guys worked that thing out." And he, he's a contractor, and he said, "Man, I just hanging out with you guys is a lot of fun because I can use this stuff with my guys at work, and because
Absolutely.
you can dial down the drama. It takes, when somebody gets dramatic, you don't have to get dramatic. You can actually just chill, and when they're calm, like my daughter was really upset, so I just listened to her, and she thought when she told me that my listening, she thought, well, he's disagreeing with me, and what I was doing was, wow, I didn't know all this was going on for you. That's what I
Right.
told her. I didn't know. I, I should have said something about this. I can see my lack of, I want to say anything about it because I guess there was something inside me as I look back on it that I was anticipating your drama. So I was avoiding it, out of convenience or fear, whatever. But I was being selfish. I can see that
Wow.
because when I think about it, there are things that you said I didn't touch because I just didn't want to disturb my comfort in the moment.
Yep. Yep.
You know,
Yep. Yeah. So many leaders just wish the problem away. That's going to go away.
yeah,
It's going to go away. And then it just
that's
develops,
going.
right? They don't, they walk
It's a
by that.
boomerang.
Yeah. They walk by that person's office and they feel that twinge. And then the next week they go around and then they try to avoid, everything slows down if they had a
Well,
framework where they could work through it.
or in the courage. I mean, the framework is only as good as the courage that's engaging
Yes.
it.
Yes.
And the only way, and you build that courage by really understanding what's at stake. I mean, look, I have been in so many turnarounds. I do mergers, acquisitions, turnarounds, where when we do the forensics on what's broken down, the revelation comes about that they could have resolved this long before if they didn't let it just fester.
Wow.
Because the lack of communication compounds the issue. People make shit up and then they validate it, and then they get more and more estranged or alienated from the team. It undermines the synergy. So it's a culture that's generated by the leader, by the
Yeah.
willingness of the leader, connected to the fact that, look, if you and I are lying about who we are together, and we want to go somewhere else together. We say, look, we're going to take this company from here to there. If we're not accurate about where we are, we're never going to get there. If you think about it with a map, if you're in LA, but you think you're in San Francisco, and you're going to New York, and you're going to New York from LA, but you're in San Francisco, you're going to end up in Canada, not in New York.
Right.
So you've got to locate where you are before you can get to where you're going. So it's great to have a vision, have all the vision you want, but if you're not connected to where the current reality is, you're never going to get to that vision.
Wow.
And you got to keep in current reality dynamic. So it's not like you can get some dogmatic approach to management and leadership that's going to always keep. You've got to constantly be gauging, connecting to where am I in relationship to where I said I'm going, so that I can accurately navigate to get there.
Boy, you
And that
just,
that
yeah. Boy, that's powerful.
that's a lot.
Wow, that's powerful. For years, I was a young leader and I looked at the people who were a couple steps ahead and had all these preconceived notions and thought they should do things differently. And then I got to that place eventually, and then I felt the weight of being there. And I never anticipated that, right? Each step along the way, more leadership responsibility, more weight. Why do you think there are some leaders who are hesitant to chase after that health? Being proactive to teach their team how to handle these conversations, how to model that type of health, how to have their focus on it. Is it just that they're too busy? Is it just no one's taught them?
I, you know, I think it's a combination. I think it's pretty, it's probably complex, more complex than I'm going to make it, I'm sure. Um, yes, I do believe, look, I raise my kids and I work with the teams. When I work with my team, we have conversations out in the open. And if somebody's upset, we listen through it. One of the things I work with is like, if we're going to argue, let's argue to resolution. It may take a day or two or three,
Mm,
maybe a week, but we're going to stay in it till we get to resolution. And resolution might even look like I'm not going to work here anymore, but I'm clean when I leave. It could be that. It could go that far.
wow.
But we've got to work to resolution because it's like when I raised my kids, we would argue in front of the kids, but we'd argue to resolution, even if it took a couple hours or a day or two. We'd include them so they could see it resolve, right? So being able to listen through that, there's something to it. Now, most people just lie to themselves.
Mm,
It's it's not important. It's not my job. One of my favorite lies is I'm a leader. I'm not here to babysit them. Oh,
mm,
really? So it's either they do it or you're babysitting them. So understanding is babysitting. Like like
wow.
who said you had to do it for them? But don't kid yourself. You're going to inherit the impact of their lack of resolution
Wow.
on the bottom line or the top line. It's going to impact you, your mission, your quality of life at work. You know, if you're going to spend 50 hours, 40, 50, 60 hours a week with people, you better get your head straight about what kind of environment you're committed to working in. And if you're prostituting yourself, if you're telling yourself the lie that I have to do this because I can't do anything else, or I won't be able to make the money, etc. Those are the lies that destroy a person's spirit. You know, and the truth about that is that you're just not challenging yourself about what you really want. You probably if look, here's the key: complaints. Notice your complaint.
Mm,
That's right, because complaints are what you're settling for. You've decided you can't get any more of what you really want, so you settle for what you really don't want and you complain about the difference then on. So when I go in, I hear people complaining. I hear frustrated requests. They're probably afraid to ask for what they want because they don't think they're going to get it, or they asked for it once before and they didn't get it, and they didn't consider that maybe the way they asked,
yep.
or was it appropriate? What's the time? There's a million things that can come in place, but they decided now they can't have it. So what they do is they bitch about it, and then they behavior, a certain behavior kicks in that makes them right about bitching about it, and they get a payoff from it, and they get to be right about the fact that they can't get what they want.
Yep.
And you know what? Soren Kierkegaard, I think, said it the best. He said, the most pernicious despair that humans can know is the despair that doesn't know itself as despair. It's the despair that's manageable, and we call it happiness,
Mm,
right? So it's like mediocrity. You okay, we're gonna settle for mediocrity because we don't think we can get really what we're after. And then some knucklehead comes along like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or you name them, anybody who's led a team into something bigger than what they thought they could do, and they're not buying. And they're looking for the ones who are willing to challenge themselves to get up to that, right? And that's usually what they'll attract. But at first, they're going to get a lot of heat, and people are going to drop out. But the people they're going to start attracting are going to be people who want to get on board with that, who
wow.
want to demand themselves. And that's a tall order, but it's worth it.
Wow.
It's worth it. It's like abundance.
Yeah.
You know? The scarcity is, I'm never going to make it through this. No, actually, there's ways to get through things if you're willing to. I'll give you an example. I got a client right now. He bought a business, and the business isn't what the guy purported it to be.
Mm.
Real estate. He bought the business, few $1,000,000, and he's in there, and he realizes, holy shit, he's going to have probably 67, 80% when he came in, he thought, I can't use it. They're not going to work out. And so I worked with him on it. And my point to him was, let's not decide before we know.
Oh.
Let's get clear about what boxes before people, what jobs do you need filled? What are the requirements for those jobs attitudinally and skills wise, right? Both you want competency and you want a fit. You want them to be, this is something I enjoy doing, and they're competent to do it. Okay, let's get clear about that. Let's set a standard. He goes, yeah, man, but how much is it going to cost me? I said, well, that's what we got to figure out, right? So we got the ramp, and the first week he was in despair, right? And I just kept saying, wait a minute, man, you're in despair because you don't think the future you're committed to is going to be coming, and you're probably looking for ways out. He goes, you're right, I am. I said, no. And we ought to go after the guy who sold you the business, sure. At the same time, you've got the business, and you got to run it, because if you don't, and you don't win the lawsuit, and you don't get compensation, you're stuck with this thing. So we worked this thing. We went through all kinds of, but this guy methodically listened to his complaints, and then said, what is it I'm afraid to ask for? And how can I ask for it? Don't ask for as much. What do I need to understand so I can move forward on this instead of going around it? And he used his complaints to do it.
Wow.
When he found himself, like he was complaining about one guy, this older guy who was working there, he just didn't, he wasn't as great a mechanic as the younger guys, but he was really consistent and he enjoyed his work. And he got the guy to talk about what he was doing with the younger guys. And 5 of the 6 other mechanics really took to it. One of them didn't like it, said, I don't need that old guy. He used explicative language. I don't need him to tell me. And he realized that guy either's got to get up to it or get out.
Yep.
But his complaint about the older guy, he went to him and talked to him about how he could help him bring these guys around. The guy did it by working on the car and showing them things that they didn't know and talking to them about what they were up to. And this guy brought a lot of stability to he just wasn't as quick as the others, right? But it was and his business has started to stabilize. He's only lost about 40% of what he thought he was going to lose 80% of.
Wow.
Right, but kept looking into his complaint. The complaint is where fear is. I'm complaining because I'm afraid I won't get what I want. So I'm going to settle for this and bitch about what I want or what I don't have, instead of figure out ways I can ask for, act on, invite others into getting that and building a narrative around it. It takes some imagination. That's the fun of business, is figuring out the narratives to rally your resources to accomplish what you're committed to. And that requires facing your fears.
Wow.
Otherwise, and if you do it, you're going to be training indirectly right with your team. You're going to train them, and they're going to get excited about it. They get nervous. It's a dance, right? It's not like it's not like I don't want to be Pollyanna because it's work, but it's good work. It's rewarding, especially when you see the breakthroughs.
Wow. Goodness gracious, that's powerful. That you have given us I've taken pages of notes here, and just unbelievable wisdom that we can enact right away in our leadership, even tomorrow. I love this. I love this. Is there anything you can leave us with? Is there a question we can ask us as we ask ourselves as we face that fear? Is there an exercise or a practice that when that fear comes up, we can approach it with, as kind of we end our conversation?
Yeah. Ask yourself what you're afraid of first. Like, what are you really? What's the worst case scenario? I don't know if you watch Jordan Peterson or any of these guys, but Peterson has a very powerful study he cites where if somebody's got a phobia, what you want to do is have them voluntarily look into the fear a
Mm,
little at a time, as much as you can. And each time they do that, their brain realizes that the fear isn't as big as it made it. And they look further and further into it. So
wow.
the idea is to like look into the fear, be willing to start to question your fears. What am I afraid of? What's the worst case that could occur? And if it did occur, what could I do about it? That will normally reduce the tension of fear by at least half. It's called I call it unplugging. You're
Wow.
un, you're you're owning the fear instead of it owning you.
Wow.
And then when your mind comes up and goes, no, your mind brings up historical situations. Well, you know that person, they're just like this, they'll never shift. You just this guy Dan, he doesn't know what I'm up against. Okay, are you willing to challenge that? If you're not, get be start to get used to be settling, start to get used to settling for what you say you really don't want. Because you got
Oof.
to challenge what you think you know about it that makes you right about not moving on it. You got to challenge that or you're never going to break through.
Wow.
And that's why having a coach or a consultant, somebody who is experienced at this can really make a difference.
Wow.
That's where we come in. That's why, our company, we do this. We do, I work with a number of startups. I've worked with Elon. We've worked with Richard Branson companies. We love working with startups because they usually have a big vision and they're just out of touch with where they currently are. Once they get in touch with where they're currently at, the breakthroughs are phenomenal. And that's how we play. That's kind of the nutshell version of what we do.
Wow.
But face those fears, and then challenge your what you think you especially about what you can't do. Challenge it. Really, is that call me? If you want to challenge, call me up. I'll be happy to challenge you for it. I like doing that.
It's just incredible. Oh my goodness. Before I let you go, this has been amazing. Let me ask you a couple rapid fire questions. We're building this online resource for leaders to go to get great new resources that can challenge their leadership. Is there a speaker that every time you hear them, you just think that they, knock it out of the park? You can't wait to share that talk with someone. Is there just someone that you would highly recommend?
Well, yeah, Jordan Peterson, love his work. Um, have you ever heard David White?
Oh yeah.
He's he's a corporate poet, and he, believe it or not, and he's written some great books. But he works with executives, and he's a poet, and he's phenomenal, and he's very very in demand.
It's amazing.
So David White,
I love
White,
it.
I really love his work.
If you're a podcast listener, not everybody is, but if you are, is there one that's either a development or a guilty pleasure that it just fills you up? You just love.
Yeah, the I'm trying to remember what's his name, Chris Williamson's
Mm.
podcast. I can't remember the name. I watch it all the time. Chris Williamson is really good. The something CEO. I've got it right here. Stand by. Let me just look at my. Yes, the it's called DOAC. Is the it's the Diary of a CEO
Yep.
with Stephen Bartlett is excellent.
Yep.
Yeah, I like his stuff. I love Chris Williamson's stuff. Both of them are, and Patrick Bet David off the charts.
Oh, absolutely. I went to my first Patrick
Yeah.
Bet David conference back in August. I went to his Vault
Oh,
conference, and it was amazing.
the guy's amazing. He's amazing. I love him. I love his stuff. I love his attitude. I really kind of watch him for presence. He's just so real when he shows up, and he's very clear. If he doesn't know something, he's not bullshitting.
Yep.
If he makes a mistake, he owns it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Same with Chris.
it's amazing how he's always, it seems like, 3 to 4 steps ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I watch Russell Brand, but he's not a business guy. I mean, he's just world of. I like his
Oh,
stuff.
sure. So
I
last
like
one.
anybody. I like anybody. I like anybody who's after exposing lies.
Absolutely. I love that. And last one is, and this is a hard one, but is there a book that you just, every leader, you got to read this book?
So you have to understand, I'm a philosopher, so I'm going to give you for the guy.
Thank you for listening to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. Thank you for leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And thank you for every like and every comment. Every single time you cut and copy a link and send it to a coworker or a friend, it absolutely means the world, and it helps each other transform our communication skills. Lastly, don't forget about a great resource that's available to you: our communication skills library. At the end of every episode, we ask each guest their favorite speaker, their favorite podcast, their favorite book, and we've compiled all of those resources together to give you an amazing library to continue your growth and development. Thank you again for being a listener and for being a part of the Speak with People community.